Okay, I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, even the kind of the boat and water ripples that we've created here, so that you can follow along, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that not only you learn about the painting process and techniques, but also about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using the default A4 canvas, which has the dimensions of 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. By default, one of the Procreate color profiles is the sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1, again here on the list. In terms of the brushes, I use the default brushes that come with the app. So within airbrushing, I'm going to use the soft brush, the medium brush, and the medium hard brush. Within inking, I'll use the studio pen. Within drawing, the evolve brush. Within elements, the clouds brush. Within organic, the rainforest brush. In terms of the colors, I've already pre-selected a color palette. Each of the colors has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. And each of these codes are listed down in the video description. So you just need to copy and paste them into this box within value, one at a time, and press enter. The color will appear up here, and then you can tap it into a blank color palette for yourself. Or alternatively, in the description is a link that takes you to my Patreon page, where you can download the whole color file for free to save you some time. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content such as extended versions of most of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really does make a huge difference. And if Patreon is not really your style, but you do want to support the channel, the simplest way of doing that is to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and maybe leave me a comment too. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate the canvas to the portrait orientation. Then I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to use the first color on the top row. I'm going to drag it from the color circle into the canvas, flood fill the canvas with that color, just gets rid of that white. I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 2. I'm going to use the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to go to the second color on the top row. I'm going to put the size at 30% and 100% opacity, and then straight through the middle of the canvas, I'm going to do a band of this color. I'm going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur it in, slide it across to about the 70% and deselect. I'm going to go to the layer slide and just duplicate it. It just ramps it up. Then on the top version of that layer, tap on it, merge down. So it just puts it back as one layer again. I think I'd like to introduce some sense of where the light is coming from. So I'm going to go back to layer 1. I'm going to go back in with the soft brush. I'm going to choose this fifth color on the middle row, this white. I'm going to put the size of the brush, soft brush within airbrushing to 60%. And I'm going to put it down to about 20% strength, opacity. And then just in this top areas, a few taps of that. Bring some of the light in. So we have a sense of light illuminating from that area a little bit more. Back to my layers, back to the top layer and create a new layer above that. Go to my brushes, I'm going to go to the elements, the clouds brush. We're going to go in with the third color on the top row. I'm going to put the size of this brush to 20% and 40% strength, opacity. And then I'm just going to start bringing it in at the top. I'll just zoom in. At this top left corner. Just some patchy textures in from this side to begin with. Maybe we'll turn it up a little bit. In fact, let's go for 70%. We're going to add a darker color on top as well, but we're just laying some textures in there initially of a warmer but slightly darker tone than the base. Do taps of this, scribbles of this. Doesn't really matter to begin with, it's quite subtle. Then we'll turn it down to maybe 10% size. As we come down here, we'll just have a few smaller little bits of this. It's very subtle with this color, so you don't need to worry too much. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and just blur it in to about the 10%. deselect. Back to my layers, create a new layer, layer 4, and I'm going to go to the 4th color on the top row. I'm going to stay with the clouds brush. Maybe put it back up. Maybe not as far as 20%. We'll put it to 15% size. Maybe, because it's a darker color, we'll put it to 50% strength, opacity. And then we're just going to build in some of this color. Just circle it in. We just want to be a little bit mindful of that initial color that we laid down. We don't want to completely cover it necessarily. So this blue exists within some of the space that we created with that slightly warmer tone. I'm going to turn it down from 15 to 10% size. And then as we encroach over to this side, maybe just allow it to be a bit more broken. And then down here, again, allow it to be a little bit more broken. Just a few little tufts that I kind of break away. It's not hugely important to the overall scene, but we just don't want the sky to look lifeless. Then we can go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and blur it in again, maybe a little bit less, maybe about 8%, and deselect. And if we're not convinced that the blue blends in well enough, we can go back to layer 3, back in with that 3rd color, maybe change to the airbrushing soft brush, 5% size, 15% strength. And we can just add a little bit more in and around some of those blue areas and just go around the edge of that, really. Just shoring it up with a little bit more of that color. Not too much. It's quite a subtle sky for this, and it just makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to go to the top layer and create a new layer, layer 5. I'm going to go to the drawing evolve brush. I'm going to tap on the brush, go within stroke path. I'm going to change the spacing up to about 50%. On the slider, 49 will do. Done. And it's just opened out the brush, created more spaces between the little particles within the brush, which is great for the textures we want now. So I'm going to initially create the horizon line, even though we're not going to see much of what I draw right now. It's going to be buried underneath other textures, but it's good to have it there to begin with. So I'll go to maybe 5% size, 100% opacity, and just guesstimate where the halfway point is, and then I'm going to go a little bit underneath that, draw a line across, hold it until it snaps. Now, horizon line or horizontal lines are difficult to judge, so just tilt it so it's clearly not horizontal. The other hand, one finger down, it snaps to a horizontal line, which again doesn't matter if it's neat because we're not going to see it, so we can just shore that up a little bit. And then I want to create like a distant set of trees. So I very much kind of misted out. They've changed colour because of the atmosphere, but I do want it to be quite sharp. So what I'm going to do just for that background set of trees is just get the height of the trees in there to begin with. Just some lines with this brush. It is pressure sensitive, so if you press more, get bigger. If you press light, you get this. So we just do a series of lines. I'm pressing lightly. They could be slightly varying heights. I don't want them to be too dramatically different from each other, but a little bit of variation in height is going to be useful. Draw the lines in there to begin with. It's just quite useful to think of them in terms of separate trees. And then you can just go in and start to fill them in. And you get this kind of natural texture. Looks like trees really without a great deal of effort. Maybe just on the in-betweens between those trees, you can just start to create just the tops of different trees as well. Just nudge it up. Remember, press lightly if you want to get that thinner peak at the top of the tree. Press more as you come lower down just to fill. But really, it's just that top edge of the trees that we're looking for, really. So we'll just work all the way across here. Only takes a couple of minutes just to fill them in, get that kind of an effect. One or two can be taller, and maybe you could just have some slight separation. The textures just move left to right. You're going to get some little spacing in that kind of branch structure opening up. You don't really need to spend too long on it. So just move across. And much of this is going to be obscured by closer to trees. So it doesn't even matter that much, really. Certainly when we get over to this side, I'm not going to invest any time in this part, so we'll just scribble that in quite loosely. Let's not waste time on things that are going to be obscured. And then pretty much the same over this side, so we'll just scribble that in. And really it's just this middle section where you're going to start noticing any of the trees poking up. So that's a useful set of trees. If there's any little gaps that are there, then you can just go in, maybe change brush, go to the airbrushing soft brush, 100% opacity in a small size, maybe 3%. Go over the gaps. Any that are noticeable, just fill them in. If they're a nuisance and going to catch your eye, then that's okay. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur. We want to soften that in. It is quite sharp when you zoom in. So slide it across to about 3%. It just softens it in. It just makes them knock back a little bit more. We don't have a sharpness to it anymore. Deselect. I'm going to go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to go to the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to go to the fourth color on the middle row. I'm going to put the size maybe about 4% and really quite low on the strength, the opacity, maybe about 15%. And I'm just going to start building in at the bottom here, just some tufts and circular movements. We want it to be slightly lighter. The mist is coming here at the bottom area. Just sort of scribble this in for the bottom. Go over that bottom area there, just do some pans of it across. Maybe go to the third color on the top row, same settings, and just lightly kind of scribble some of that in as well. Don't need to do too much, don't press on too much, press lightly, zoom that across a couple of times. Going to go to the smudge tool at the top, put that on the airbrushing soft brush, 5% size, 20% strength, and just go in there and just scribble that in a little bit. It's just going to soften it. It's not too harsh. Blend it together. We may go and add a little bit more later, but that's a good start. Go to our layers again, create a new layer, layer 7, and I'm going to switch back to the drawing evolve brush. I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to use the 6 color on the top row. And we're going to use a combination of brushes. So I'm going to go to the organic first, the rainforest brush. I'm going to reset it to begin with. I have changed the spacing, which I will also use in a moment. I'm going to use the default version first. I'm going to put the brush size to maybe 3%, just a little bit back from 100% opacity. So we'll put 90, zoom up, and then I'm going to start bringing in some shapes or round textures. We've got these kind of fir trees, pine trees or whatever. But then we've got other kind of textures in here as well. So we'll just bring this in and across to the right side. Do it a couple of times, bring in these rounder shapes. Maybe turn the brush size down 2%. Just some broken textures up here as well, just a few taps. Just to vary that top area of texture up. Go to the layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock, which just means if we're going with another color now, it means it's going to be contained within the boundaries of that color. We're not going to use that color. However, we're going to use the 7th color on the top row, low down on the 2%, size, and maybe about 30% strength, opacity. And then I'm just going to introduce some of this lighter tone. It's only subtly lighter and it's going to appear just a little bit more green. You wouldn't really call it green on the spectrum when you look at the color disc, but it almost has a slightly warmer or vibrant green appearance when you start applying it to the blue that we've already used. So just at the top edges, we're going for this kind of round shape. Light is just impacting a little bit. So I'm going to go back to layer 6 underneath layer 7, and from layer 6 create a new layer, layer 8. So importantly is underneath layer 7. I'm going to go back in with the slightly darker color, which is the 6th color on the top row, and again we're going to change back to the drawing evolve brush. I'm going to put it pretty low down, maybe 3% size and 100% opacity, just to create a little bit of a sharper contrast. I'm going to do these trees sticking up. Again, just press lightly as you get towards the top of the tree, just to have that tapering off. You just have to zoom out occasionally just to see in context. Maybe another really nice tall tree here, maybe even a little bit taller. Maybe just the suggestion of one or two. I don't want to conflict too much with that one. We're certainly going to have a variety of different heights of trees here. And then from the top, I'm just going to swing to the left and to the right. A few taps. We want to introduce this sense of space in the foliage, in between the branches. Generally, we want them sweeping in a kind of downward movement. And after a certain point, we can just start to blot them in, fill in a lot more of the gaps. And then it comes down and kind of meets the other textures that we've already created. And similarly for this one here, because it's smaller, shorter, and you're not going to see the top of it quite the same way, you can just kind of blot this in a little bit more. Or rather a little bit less precisely, I should say. Same with this one. Off towards the edge of the canvas. Fill that in. Another one here. A few taps left and right. A bit more open. More noticeable than the distant ones. Fill them in. Create some more open little bits of texture there at the edges, and that's really what we're going for. And I might just go back to the organic rainforest brush, 2% size, 90% strength, and I can just go in there and I can use that now as a combination. So I want bits of the softness to be in here in places just to balance it in, but not as much. Just blend those two areas together a little bit. Soften them in. I feel like there's a few gaps we perhaps could have left there. So again, you can go in with the eraser, put the eraser to the drawing evolve brush. It's going to be the same settings. Turn it down 2% size, let's say 70% opacity, and you can just introduce some gaps. If you want there to be a few more gaps, then you can just remove with the eraser. It's not all about adding. Sometimes removing is just as valuable. Just one or two more gaps there, perhaps. Just fine tune. With that whole layer, I'm going to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and we are going to blur it in slightly, not too as much as the background, perhaps just maybe 2% is sufficient. Deselect. Back up to layer 7. I'm going to tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. I'm going to go back to the 7th color on the top row, back in with the organic rainforest brush, 2% size, 90% strength. I'm just going to shore up some of these textures just so they kind of merge back into this area a little bit as well. Just tap them through there. A bit more solid in places. Like so. That works better. Go to the layers and create a new layer, layer 9. I'm going to go back to the 4th color on the middle row, again with the airbrushing soft brush, 5% size, 15% opacity, strength, and again we're going to start chipping away at the bottom area, introducing that mist. It's continuing to sort of impact in these lower areas. Just create that atmosphere and that low-lying mist. I think it's a really simple way of creating the atmosphere in terms of the mood, but yeah, literally the atmosphere in this case. Just a few light types, blend it in. We don't want it to be too lumpy. If you feel like it's gone too lumpy, you can always go to the smudge, put it on the soft brush with an airbrushing, 4% size, 20% strength, and you can just scribble over that, and it will soften in the harshness of some of that if you feel like it's necessary. Back to the brush, a few taps. Should really kind of lose the bottom edge of it pretty much, and that's starting to work really quite nicely, I feel. So we're going to go to our layers, create a new layer, layer 10. So on this new layer, we're going to go to the 8th color on the top row, and we're going to go in with the rainforest brush within organic. And we know roughly where the horizon line was, so we're going to do a little bit below that point. Things get closer to us, they get slightly lower down in the canvas. Bring that across. And I'm just starting to scribble in a mound here, just a piece of land. It swells up at the side. Will support trees. Then it kind of slopes down, maybe another little rise here for eventually slopes down to the water's edge. Let's turn that brush size down from 2% to 1%, still at the 100% opacity. And then we can just fine tune that across until it really disappears. Now, if you want to just create a cleaner horizontal line, then keep it at the 1%. Maybe do it from this point, might be quite useful. Over to here, hold it until it snaps. And there's the horizontal line. Then you can just fill in to that line like so. I'm going to go to the smudge, put the smudge on the organic rainforest brush. I'm going to put it really low down, 1%, 100% opacity. And then I'm just going to use that to just brush up some textures that I don't really need to be too defined. We definitely need the suggestion that there's textures there. I could put it on something like the inking studio pen to really create a sense of blades of grass, but I don't need this to be particularly focused and sharp. So we're just creating the suggestion of it with the rainforest brush on the smudge, and it's perfectly sufficient. We're just changing that top surface just to be a little bit more raggedy, like I say, a bit more grass-like. Just spend a minute or two on that, although we are going to obscure much of it with trees and other things. The bit that's going to be visible is this section, although again, it's still going to be covered with mist more than it currently is. So just a suggestion. Textures that are pushing up. Just go over any of the little gaps on it as well. Then I'm going to change brush. I'm going to go for the 9th color on the top row. Rainforest brush, 2% size, maybe 30% strength. And just tap in. And again, we're going for these kind of curves, these mound shapes. And I just want to break up some of these textures. I'm going to tap on the layer and put on the alpha lock actually, just so we can go right up to the top. Be untidy without worrying about extending into anywhere else on the canvas. It's going to be contained within this shape. And perhaps we could turn that opacity down even further to 20%. Just create some subtle variation. Now, although this image can appear pretty straightforward and simple at first glance, there's actually quite a lot of subtle textures in there that they're the things that are going to make it really work. So we are spending time just on those subtleties. If you keep it too simple, then actually it will look too flat and less interesting. And just prioritizing that edge a little bit like that. Go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 11. I'm going to go to the inking studio pen. I'm going to go back to the 8th color on the top row. I'm going to put it at 20% size and 100% opacity, and we're going to do some trees over on this side. Now, not only do they start from a lower point, but they're also going to stretch up to a higher point, but only subtly higher than the trees over here. And that's going to generally help us understand that they are closer to us because they're bigger in every sense. So we're going to start down here. Release the pressure as you get higher up, and another one. And you can go back over the bottom section, press on a little bit more, and we'll gradually release that pressure, press on a bit more, Now you can put the size up really big and you can still press lightly, but you can see it's too easy to create that variation through the pressure. I find if you put it down to about 20%, it's just a little bit easier to manage. We can do some more trees through here. Again, much of this is just going to be obscured with the branch structures and foliage, but we'll get them in there to begin with. Then we're going to go to the organic rainforest brush, which we're going to tap on, go to stroke path and spacing and increase that up to maybe 50%. Done. I'm going to stay with the 8th color on the top row, 2% size, 90% strength, and I'm just going to start building in the foliage, the textures, and we're not necessarily going for the same kind of trees. We'll do some slightly more round shapes. Concentrate a little bit at the top. I want it to be blobs and sections that are just weighted differently. So you can see I've left a nice gap there. I think that works. And as we come down here, we can just scribble it in a bit more, concentrate on it, build up that density. Just do this tree just on the edge there initially. I did do another tree trunk, but that ends up being not that noticeable. I'm not too bothered. Center area, just make it a little bit wider. Tap it in a little bit, and I think that's quite nice. It's a little bit more open. And then as we come over to this section, I'm quite happy to fill that in a bit more, bulk it in. And then at the top is where we're going to start noticing those textures once more. So a bit more open, but I think that's the one that I want to be the most open. So these ones are going to be comparably less. So we can just fill those in. Be a bit more free, so just scribble. Fill all those little gaps in. There's not really any light escaping through, apart from just in the top area where we're just going to start returning back to those little taps to fill in. Plot it in a little bit more, a few more taps along the edge, blend those ones together. It can just be a little bush down here maybe. And that's starting to pull together quite nicely, I think. Something like this. I'll go to that layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm going to go to the colors. I'm going to use the 10th color on the top row, low on that 2% size, maybe a little less on the opacity, 70%. And then just at that top edge, I'm going to introduce some of this color a little bit. Don't necessarily need to go overboard with this. Scribble in, it's got a slightly lower, lighter rather, tone, a bit more green coming in. Maybe turn that strength down to 50% as we start coming lower down in this area. It's still going to be noticeable, but more subtle, just a little bit here and there. I think that works quite nicely. Now, that whole image, we want to grab and we want to create our reflection using that. So we're going to go to the wrench, add, copy canvas, and then paste becomes highlighted, so then we can tap on there. You won't really notice there's much of a difference. If you go to the thumbnails, there is a new thumbnail, a new layer called inserted image that represents the entire image of the canvas so far. But we don't want all of it. We don't want that bottom section. So we're going to go to the selection, rectangle, and we're just going to carefully maybe start at that top corner, drag it across and then down till it completely envelops that bottom blank area. Release, tap on the layers, tap on that layer and clear. Now you can see it's just reduced, it's shrunken a little bit because now we have a perfect copy of the entire image so far. We can go to the transform. You can see it's just selected that area and then flip it vertically, turns it upside down. We can go to the freeform, pull it up, squash it a little bit, and then we can move it lower down on the image to create our reflection. And you can even squash it in a bit more. We're going to line it up so that it perfectly mirrors everything we've created. It's nice just to be able to have that little gap so that we've got all of that mirrored down here, but we get a little bit of the sky represented there as well, which is why I squashed it. Now, I do find perfectly crystal clear kind of water's a beautiful thing, but we are going to go to the adjustments, motion blur, slide it across a bit. It opens up a little gap at that edge, but we're not too worried about that. I will address that. I'm going to slide it across to the side, maybe about 20%, deselect. Like I say, we have got a little edge there, but it's not a problem. We can just go to the smudge, put the smudge on the airbrushing medium hard brush, 3% size, 100% opacity, and just push it that way. Get rid of that gap, put it on a bigger size, maybe 7%, speeds it up, gets rid of that. And very simply, it creates a really nice reflection that is really quite effective. But we're going to add more of the atmosphere. So we're going to go to our layers, create a new layer above that, layer 13. Again, we're going to go in with the airbrushing, soft brush, and we're going to go back to the fourth color on the middle row. I'm going to put it to 3% size and 10% opacity strength, and then just rotate the canvas so it's easier. I'm going to run this across that point there, the reflection point basically. That is our kind of horizon line now, point at which the reflection is created. Just zoom that in. I'm going to put it up to maybe 6%, build that across, up and down. And that's a really good way of starting it. I'm going to switch color. I'm going to go to the colors. I'm going to go to the second color on the middle row. Soft brush, still with an airbrushing, maybe 5% size, 10% strength. And I think I want to introduce just a bit more blue. It's just subtly a bit brighter. Bring it down into the water a little bit. And it creates a little bit of a sense of banding. And that's no bad thing for the reflections. Scribble it upwards a little bit, just, it's only at 10%, but even that's quite strong. Just tap, scribble in that upper area. And then in this section down here, perhaps we're going to do more as bands, like I say. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 14. I'm going to go in with the soft brush still. I'm going to go for the third color on the middle row, 2% size, let's say 20% strength, or thereabouts. I'm going to try and judge it across here, so I want it to be just in line with underneath that point that we've created. I'm going to run a line across. There we go, just skims it, hold it until it snaps, other finger down, and that's created a little bit of a real bright point to work upwards with. I don't want to work downwards from that line, just up. It just creates a cleaner line there for us. So maybe just put that up to 3% again, and then just from the edge, we're just going to tuft it up. Just so we've got a little bit of kind of mist that has settled on the water's surface there. If that's a bit harsh, you can go in with the smudge, soft brush, 3% size, 20% strength, and you can just soften that in a little bit, even stronger on the strength. In fact, let's go for 40%, and you can just soften that in. So mainly just that bottom edge that we want to be a little bit more crisp. The top bit you can just blend up. Now we're going to come down into this area. I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 15. On this layer, we're going to go in with the 6th color on the top row. I'm going to go in with the Studio Pen with an inking, 20% size and about 80% strength. I'm just going to rotate it because it's a little bit easier. We're going to add to these ripples, make them a little bit crisper, a bit clearer. Now, if you press and then release the pressure, you can get this kind of tapered at the start and beginning, or starting at the end rather. Doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. We're just kind of representing just a suggestion, sharpening up some of these shapes. I want them to be a little bit clearer, and you can see a little bit goes a long way. They are actually too crisp at this point, so we will use the motion blur to soften these in. But you can see it definitely changes that kind of blurry motion blur reflection into something that looks a bit more convincingly like ripples in water. It's not 100%, doesn't get us all of the way there, but it definitely assists. So just a few features at the edge. And then we can extend some bands of this. And we can use the other colors too. You can see the effect that that has. I think it's quite useful. We can go perhaps to the second color on the top row. And we can push away from the edge with this lighter color as well. So it's combinations. Combining the two, and when you keep zooming out to look at it, you can see how much more like water ripples that looks now than the other side for comparison. Again, on these areas, perhaps you can just have a few more shapes in here just to break it up. Like this, for example. We've got that color, that blue, so let's go and find that color. I suppose it was the fifth color on the top row. So again, we could bring some of these ripples in, these little broken shapes. That's working quite effectively too. And then over at this side, we've got obviously changes in colors. So we need to go back to our colors. I believe it was the 8th color. And again, quite dark color. But it does kind of more blend in with this color. You can see when you add it there, you don't really see it. Don't notice it, so it must be the same color. Again, try to keep these shapes more horizontal. You can see that it definitely enhances the sense of water ripples. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it is without this effect. I think water is one of the more difficult things. Water ripples, one of the more difficult things to represent. So this is helping. It's getting us closer. And again, we can jump back to the third color on the top row. And we can just push in at that edge too. Maybe in this area, perhaps we could turn it up even more, nearly 50%, and we can have some breaks in this area too. That's starting to work pretty well. And then in addition to that, we're going to go to the adjustments, the motion blur, and we just need to be very careful. We want to move this completely horizontally, or as much as we can manage to the side. I'm not going to do it too much, maybe about 25%. Deselect, and it's just softened them in. I think it's definitely assisted that water effect. So that's our general landscape. We're just going to do a little feature, a little boat in our scene. So we're going to go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 16. Now, boat shapes are not easy, so we're going to do our best. We're going to go for the first color on the bottom row. We're going to go in with the airbrushing medium hard brush, 2% size, 100% opacity. And it doesn't matter initially how big it is, we can always change and adjust this, but we're going to go for a point here. I'm going to curve it down and curve it this way and hold it. And I'm going to do the other side over here. So I'm going to have it slightly higher up. Curve it, hold it. That might be a little bit too much higher, so just subtly higher. Try and judge it by eye. Curve it and hold it. And then we're going to join from there to there, and it's going to be a bit of a curve as well. So hold it until it snaps to that curve. And then we're going to have more of an exaggerated curve to this point. So I'm going to have it in here, a bit lower down, and then up and down. So if you need to extend it a little bit further, it skims that point. And then over here, and even beyond it. So I'm going to try that again. Clip that corner over here, hold it until it snaps, and we've got a nice curve to work with. Now, this is definitely not a perfect looking boat, but it will give us the effect. Just remove 100% opacity, 2% size on the soft brush, get rid of all the little excess bits that we don't need. So go back to the brush, medium hard brush, and just maybe on this side, just a little bit that sticks out here beyond that line, tucks back in, has a little point that sticks up, and then there's just a little sense of that curve, maybe just curves in here a little bit, sweeps up, and then we can fill it in. Now we can always just drag the color into that section. There you go. So I'll just extend that point a little bit more. Now, if you want to find a different reference for a boat, then you can spend as long as you like just perfecting this. I'm just going to soften that transition there a little bit. It's a little bit harsh. Raise it up. I think maybe that's working a bit better. I'm going to turn the opacity down to maybe 95%. Turn the size of the brush up 40%, and I'm just going to colour that in. We can still see, I can see, I hope you can see on camera, there's still a bit of a separation of that area from that area. Now I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 17. I'm going to go along to the 5th colour on the bottom row, again with the medium hard brush, 1% size, maybe 90% strength. I'm going to try and just follow these curves, so get it so you can see the whole boat. I'm going to do it from here, trace along that curve best you can, about here, hold it. And then from that curve, I'm just going to continue it up to kind of here. I'm going to do one over here, just there's a couple of blips on this side. Just carefully do it freehand. Doesn't matter if it's not perfectly neat. Just do your best along there. I'm going to take that layer slide and duplicate it. The bottom version, I'm going to go to the adjustments, the hue, saturation and brightness, and turn the brightness down to none. Go on the transform, and I'm just going to move it down a little bit, and you can see it's just creating a little bit of a darkness underneath that light line, which can be quite useful. Deselect. I'm going to go back to layer 16, create a layer above it, layer 19 now, tap on it and put on the clipping mask, which links it to layer 16. I'm going to go in perhaps with the 4th colour on the bottom row, still with the medium hard brush, 3% size, 90% strength. I'm just going to build in from this side a lighter colour, and we'll build it across here, and it's going to curve up with the shape, and it's going to get a little bit darker as it comes around here, so it kind of blends out. Press more lightly as it comes round. Like that. That already has created a bit more of the 3D shape of this boat. Turn it down 2%, and then we're going to have it thin at the bottom of this section here and get a bit thicker, wider as it comes up on this side. And again, that continues that sense of 3D-ness. I'm going to go back to the 1st colour, and we're just going to sharpen up that bottom edge, put it to 100%, and then just at that back edge, we'll just bring it up a little bit. Sharpen up that separation of tones. I'm going to go to the 6th colour, again with the medium hard brush, zoom in, 1% size, maybe 80% strength, and then in this area, just create a little back area here, angle it. The back section of the boat there, a bit more of a straight line maybe. I think I'd like to bring that across more actually, just flatten it out over here, extend it further that way, and then go to the backwards, the 5th colour, create a little shadow there, and another one across there. None of this needs to be absolutely perfect, not really. And then for this section, I'm actually going to go to the colours. I'm going to go double tap in the black area and add the black at the very end here. It's the new colour. It will already have been on the palette if you've been following or downloaded the palette anyway, but I'm adding it mid-tutorial, sometimes the way it goes. 2% size, 20% strength, and I'm just going to start bringing in a bit more darkness over here, underneath this point, a bit more shadow across here. Like that. We can go in and tidy little blips like that up. So stay with the black, turn it down, 1%, 100% opacity. Probably need to be on the layer above, don't we? Any of the layer 17s, just tidy it up. A little bit fine tuning, a little line across here. Go to the lightest blue here, 7th colour, 1% size, 100% opacity. Put it up here, bring up that line, and also along the edge just a little bit. I don't want to make it too obvious, just a bit of subtlety there. Maybe just a little bit along that top edge, but not too much. So I'm going to take all of those boat layers from 16, 19 and the two layer 17s. I'm going to pinch them together. They're all in one layer. Now looking at it, I feel like I want to go to the transform and just rotate it that way a little bit. Yours might look different, but mine just needs a bit more flattening out. That works better. Now I need to create the reflection, which isn't really going to work if we mirror reflection. The reflection is only going to see the bottom of the boat. It's not going to see this top section. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to put it underneath layer 16. I'm going to again return to the medium hard brush and again to the first color on the bottom row. Put it to 2% size, 100% opacity, and again just curve it down here, hold it here, and we do want to try and match up that point. So you can do maybe a point in the reflection that lines up with here. Again, curve it in. Actually, it doesn't matter if it's not neat because we're going to ripple the edge of it, and maybe we get a little bit of a swirling out at this point. And then from this point, we get a little bit of a swelling out here and it joins back in as well. I'm just going to fill it in initially, 5% size. Let's just fill it in. Again, it's underneath the boat, so we can't damage anything. Turn down again, fill it in, tap on it, put on the alpha lock, can switch color. We're going to go for the third color on the bottom row, maybe go to the medium brush, slightly softer, 3% size, 70% strength. And then just take that section. We've got a lighter band here, so that is going to be represented in the reflection. But it gets more subtle as it comes over here and blends out. That's fine. A little bit lighter on the edge. Go to a lighter color, the fifth color, 2% size. And then from that point, just like we've got this, we've got that kind of lighter section there reflected too. And on here, that's the basic reflection, but we're going to add ripples to it. So we'll tap on it, turn off the alpha lock once more. Go in with the inking studio pen, go to the first color, and then we're going to extend some of these shapes in a very similar way to the we did over here. We just create some lines that kind of ripple out from that point, and it can also ripple in, goes both ways, brings it out, as you can see, goes that way. And maybe if you do it like that, it's easier to pull the ripples down. I just find it very difficult to do sideways, so I prefer to angle it a little bit differently. Pull the lines straight down and across. Point similar as that. Let's zoom over to this side. We can have it moving that way a little bit too. Not too much, however. And then maybe we can just go to this color, long press on that localized kind of color. You don't want to do too much of that, just push it in. And just create a little separation there. That looks quite useful. And then we'll just nibble in on this edge. Maybe we need to locally select that blue. Just nibble in from that edge. That goes a long way. I'm going to go to that whole layer, tap on it. In fact, go to the little N and just dial it back just a hint, maybe to 97%. And it's just a note lighter than the boat itself. And I think that that assists. So what I can do is I can go take the top layer 16, tap on it and merge down. I can go to the transform. And now I can move the boat to wherever I want, put it on uniform, reduce the scale, and I can put this now wherever I feel it has the biggest impact. I think somewhere about there, and deselect. And yeah, there we go. We've completed our full scene, misty, forest kind of lake landscape with a little boat. There we go. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this landscape. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave me a comment, All of those things really help out with the YouTube algorithm and is much appreciated. Anyway, that's all for this week. Look forward to seeing you back here soon. Bye for now.